Hello everybody, I've been using Xbox controllers ever since the first one, the original OG Xbox. And in this video, I just want to talk about the evolution of where we were and how we came to where we are right now. First controller we're going to talk about is the Duke. Now I do not have the original one anymore, but I do have the 20th anniversary edition. This is by Hyperkin. The shape, the size, and the layout are practically the same as the original. Right off the bat, you notice that this guy is ginormous. Look at this. And I have pretty big hands. My God, this has got to be one of the biggest controllers ever. And you may be thinking, why and who the heck designed a controller that looks like this? Believe it or not, but this controller is actually based on another controller. Let me show that to you. The Dreamcast controller. Right off the bat, you can see the similarities. The wings are very similar. The face buttons got similar color schemes. The positioning of the D-pad and the joystick is very similar as well. And you can also see the triggers here are very similarly positioned. Even down to the 2 memory card slots here. The Dreamcast also has 2. For those of you who don't know, back in the day, Microsoft is a partner of Sega and they work very closely together. The Duke controller was definitely inspired by the Sega Dreamcast controller, as you can see. Microsoft added a second stick here, and then their face buttons are slanted, and actually these buttons are pressure sensitive. In Dead or Alive 3, I know that if you press the button really hard, it'll do like a super or a more powerful move. And Microsoft also added the black and white buttons here. Obviously these aren't primary buttons. And check out the thumbsticks. One joystick is concave and the other one is primarily convex with a little bit of a concave dip in here. And as you can see, the D-pad is super weird looking. It's pretty heavy. But surprisingly, it's very playable for fighting games. And to this day, I'll go to my grave saying that this is the best controller for shooters. This controller was released for the Western audience, and the Japanese got this guy. This is the Controller S. It's a lot smaller than the original Duke. This guy is just a lot easier to handle if you don't have ginormous hands like I do. As you can see, the face buttons are straight now, they're not slanted anymore, and the black and white buttons is moved to the bottom. And I'm pretty sure the reason they moved it to the bottom because they just don't have room up here for the black and white buttons. I prefer these buttons to be over here actually on top. Both of the joysticks are the same now, they're both concaved, and the shape of the D-pad is a lot more traditional here. The Controller S is just better for a wider variety of games, and I love this guy. I've spent countless hours on DOA 2 Ultimate with this controller. Oh my god. This controller is just great for fighting games, let me tell you. The D-pad is excellent. Xbox 360 came out, we have this controller. As you can see, it retained a lot of the features of the Controller S, but we no longer have the black and white buttons. They are actually moved up here, so they became shoulder buttons, which just makes a lot of sense, right? The face buttons are very similar, but I feel like the 360 buttons are a lot more clicky. The joysticks feel the same to me. On the 360 controller, we do not have memory card slots anymore. And you can see they move the trigger up a lot more, you see that? And this makes sense because you want to be able to move from trigger to shoulder button really quickly, right? Whereas if you keep it down here, it's going to get blocked. While this D-pad was great, the 360 D-pad unfortunately started out terribly. And the main reason why is this back button here. It keeps on hitting the side of this little raised platform. And then the back button just wouldn't register because it couldn't go all the way, there's no room. However, later releases, Microsoft fixed this issue. I think they made this little circular area a little bit bigger to give more room for the buttons to travel. And I feel that because of this flaw, Microsoft's got a bad rep for having a bad D-pad. And it started with the 360 controller. And by the way, there are two versions of this controller. There's this wire one, and then Microsoft also has a wireless version as well, with the battery we are familiar with. And let me tell you, at the time, wireless was a big deal. Honestly, I didn't think it could be done. I thought there was going to be a lot of lag because I play a lot of fighting games, but it turns out it's actually not that bad. And now, wireless is the standard, really. I want to get back to the D-pad really quickly. Microsoft got such a bad rap on the D-pad that they actually created this controller. Now on the surface, it doesn't look any different, right? Well, check this out. Did you see that? It just transformed into a cross-shaped D-pad. So you spin this thing. Now, it's kind of like a hybrid D-pad now. Microsoft came out with this controller for players who complain about the D-pad. Look at that. I just love the color scheme on this controller. Although the idea is really cool, in practice, this D-pad's not that great. It's really loose. And it's not very accurate, unfortunately. And did I mention the guide button on the Xbox 360 controller? This button was a big deal at the time. For the first time, you have an overlay of the menus where you can access your friends and switch to different games easily. Now every controller has a home button now. This guy is the guy that started it all. Now this cross-shaped D-pad is a great idea. I just wish that it worked well. And what do you know, on the Xbox One, we have a cross-shaped D-pad that did work well. And I wonder if this controller was an inspiration for Microsoft to go cross-shape on the Xbox One. While I do like the cross-shaped D-pad, unfortunately there's a few flaws here. One, there's not a lot of travel. Look how close to the surface the D-pad is compared to this guy, you see that? So you can't really have a feel for the D-pad. And to make it worse, it's actually placed inside this little concave circular thing, which makes it feel like there's even less travel because your thumb will keep on hitting the edge if you do any of these directions on the edge. This D-pad would have been a lot better had they just raised it up a little bit more. The face buttons feel a little bit more tactile and clicky on the Xbox One controller. I wonder if this is the controller where they switched to having metal base switches. This feels a little mushy to me. Whereas this one, feels so good. The joysticks received a huge improvement here. If you look at the edges around the sticks, you're gonna see this really cool and grippy texture. And as you can see here, the shape of the shoulder button and the trigger changed from just the traditional button and trigger on the 360 to it looking like this. Personally, I would have just preferred them sticking with this design, to be honest with you. For one, the shoulder buttons, you can click it anywhere here, but on the Xbox One controller, you can only depress it on this side. This side seems to be anchored down, you see that? There's not much travel at all. And the trigger's got this extra wing on it. I do not understand why. I guess it's for aesthetic. It makes it look nice because it connects But to be honest with you, this doesn't feel like a trigger anymore to me. See, this is a trigger. This does not look like a trigger. There are a few versions of the Xbox One controller. I've got the limited edition here. This is the Call of Duty limited edition. Looks nice, right? I really like this golden D-pad. This controller is actually based on the launch controller design, and you can tell by the top here. You see how there is this shiny plastic that goes all the way around the top of the controller? Whereas this guy, the guide button is actually on the faceplate. And at launch, there was a lot of complaints about the shoulder button. Look, you can't press it. And you're forced to press the shoulder buttons with your knuckles like that. And they fixed it with the later revision. It's a lot easier now to press it from the inside. And I believe this new revision also has Bluetooth built in as well. The Xbox One generation is a really long generation. And with that long life cycle, Microsoft created many controllers. And one of them is a Pro controller. This is the Xbox Elite Series 2 controller. As you can see, there are 4 paddles here, and then we have trigger stops. It's so cool. We got this awesome grip on these handles. Look at this. And it comes with this nice charger, some different sticks here, and as you can see here, 2 different kind of D-pads. So there's this little plate here, and then there's also this cross-shaped D-pad as well. Personally, I think this cross-shaped D-pad is better for fighting games, but I know that some folks with bigger fingers, they prefer this plate right here. Personally, this plate is a little too loose and inaccurate for me, but it looks super cool though. Look at this. It looks like it's something that came out of, what's that game, that blocky game. And this guy's magnetic. You can just take it out and then replace it with the traditional cross-shaped D-pad. I know that SCUF exists, but I feel that the Elite controllers is the start of Pro controllers getting popular. Let me tell you, this guy is sold out constantly. You can't find it anywhere. And if you did, they go for outrageous prices. And for good reason. This is an awesome controller. You know how I said that this transforming cross-shaped D-pad probably inspired the Xbox One cross-shaped D-pad. And I wonder if this hybrid-looking plate D-pad inspired the Xbox One's D-pad. The D-pad looks like they are squares and they are made of pixels. Check out the Series X D-pad. You can definitely see the resemblance. Initially, I was very skeptical about this design. I thought that these raised edges is gonna hurt your fingers. But actually it doesn't. It works really well. In fact, this is the best D-pad available on any controller really. These raised edges really makes doing diagonals and feeling around the D-pad super easily. And unlike the Xbox One's D-pad where there's not really any travel at all, on top of that it's caved in, the Xbox Series D-pad has a lot more travel as you can see. And it's not on a caved in surface anymore. It just sits flat against the faceplate. It took many years and many generations, but I feel that Microsoft finally nailed it with the D-pad. We went from this thing right here, and I wouldn't even call this a D-pad. To now, you have a legit awesome D-pad on an Xbox controller. The face button feels just as good and tactile. The joysticks are still very good, and it still has this nice texture around it. And believe it or not, but the shoulder buttons and the trigger actually changed a bit. For one, the shoulder button is tapered down quite a bit at the edges, whereas with the Xbox One controller, it doesn't really taper that much. And the triggers on the Xbox Series controllers is a little bit thinner. You see that? It doesn't have that much of a wing anymore. They also added the textures of the triggers as well. Overall, this is a big improvement over the Xbox One design. And finally, the last controller I have here is the 20th Anniversary Edition controller. Look how cool this looks. Here's the 20th Anniversary logo. It's see-through, as you can see. Oh man. On the back of the handle, you get this nice rubbery grip. Everything is pretty much the same as the regular Xbox Series controller aside from the rubber grip, but it just looks so much better. It just looks so badass. Look at this. I am ready for war with this controller. And I'm gonna close the video with this. I'm waiting for the Elite Series 3, and to be honest with you, all I need them to do is replace this D-pad with this guy, and I'm gonna be one happy camper. Alright, that's gonna be it for me. I know it's a long video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more. Take care now.